Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. They say there's no Batman without the Joker. I don't know who they are. Maybe I've said it. Maybe you said it. Maybe we've all said it at some point as fans. Whoever said it first, kudos to that guy, because he's got it all figured out. But when you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Duality of the character, right? Two sides of the same coin, perhaps. One side of the coin is clean and fresh. The other one is scratched, huh? See where I'm going with that? That's another villain. We'll talk about him here today, too. But again, the notion of there's no Batman without Joker because one complements the other in some weird way. And they both are, again, maybe cut from the same cloth to a certain degree. Whether or not you believe that, that's up to you. But imagine a DC universe in which there's Batman and a whole bunch of thugs and just low-life criminals, and that's all he's got. It's kind of hard to imagine that. So maybe those guys are right when they say you need Batman, you need the Joker. If you're the Joker, you need Batman. It's one and the same. They talk about that in the movie we're going to do today because we're covering The Dark Knight. And we told you in the Batman Begins episode that we're probably going to do the trilogy. Where here we are, we're back, and we're hitting part 2 of the Dark Knight trilogy, the Nolan verse, if you will. And yes, today we're talking about The Dark Knight. Lots to get into, a huge movie, and again, a lot of stuff to cover. So let's do this, shall we? The Dark Knight is a 2008 superhero film directed by Christopher Nolan from a screenplay co-written with his brother Jonathan. Based on the DC Comics superhero Batman, it is the sequel to Batman Begins from 2005 and the second installment in the Dark Knight trilogy. The plot follows the vigilante Batman, Police Lieutenant James Gordon, and District Attorney Harvey Dent, who form an alliance to dismantle organized crime in Gotham City. Their efforts are derailed by the Joker, an anarchistic mastermind who seeks to test how far Batman will go to save the city from chaos. The ensemble cast includes Christian Bale, of course, in the title role, and a lot of other characters that we'll get to here today. Of course, based on characters appearing in comic books published by DC Comics, and story by Christopher Nolan, as well as David Goyer. The running time for this film is 152 minutes. The budget for this movie, this is a good one. The budget for this movie is $185 million. Not too shabby, right? The box office for this movie is $1 billion. I didn't even give you time for a drum roll. It's $1 billion freaking dollars. And that is the lowdown for The Dark Knight. Phil, we said when we started this up that we're going to hit the trilogy, and we're going to. And again, we're back for part 2 here today. And we heaped a lot of praise on Batman Begins because it deserves it, because it earned it. Talk to me about your thoughts going into this review. What do you think about this movie, maybe overall versus the first one? And is this an example of The Empire Strikes Back versus Star Wars: A New Hope, perhaps?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good movie. Probably one of the best sequels of all time. Probably by most people considered the best comic book movie of all time. I don't agree with that assessment, but I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. It definitely was at the peak of popularity for the genre. I would say that 2008, when it came out, was a big turning point for the genre. That was really the start of the MCU because that was the year we got Incredible Hulk and Iron Man came out the same year. I remember going to see Iron Man that same summer that Dark Knight came out and going to see Dark Knight at midnight, and man, it just was a different time. And I feel like a big part of the boom for comic book movies can be taken back to that time period. And there's a reason for that. I mean, this movie man, it changed so much. It changed the way a lot of people view the genre. It changed a lot of the way that people talk about comic book movies. It changed the way that people talk about the characters in this movie. Um, man, just a landmark moment for comic book movies in a lot of ways.
Man, remove Batman from this, Phil, and it's still a great movie. Like Christian Bale could have just been wearing a ski mask and it wouldn't have mattered. They could have called him anything, and it's still a highly effective movie without it even being a Batman film.
Yeah, and I think that's a gift and a curse to this movie because I do think it's a very good movie, but I also think sometimes it feels like it's a very good movie in spite of its source material.
Mm.
Because while it does have like clear ties to things like Long Halloween and Dark Victory, um, and it does do a lot of great things with the characters in this movie. Um, in some ways, it's a comic book movie for people that are kind of not the biggest comic book fans. Like it tries very hard to not be like any comic book movie that came before it. It tries to be
Mm.
grounded and realistic, and it tries to give you all of this heady dialogue and exposition. It tries very hard to uh, exceed the source material and the genre, and in some ways it succeeds. But as a fan of the source material, sometimes it kind of feels like, hey, that's great, but I also just want it to be campy and hokey as sometimes too.
I mean, we bragged on the first movie and said that it served the first movie well. Has it flipped here for this movie? You think it's too much?
I do think it still served this movie well. I think that in parts it's still great. Um, but when I think Joker and just how campy and how comic book comic booky he is, for us lack of a better words, how fantastical he is. He works in this movie, but at the same time, sometimes I was thinking like, hey man, I would just like him to have things like laughing gas and like acid squirting flowers and stuff because those things are part of who he is.
Right. You are an
Um,
old school Joker fan. I remember that for sure.
yeah, so this depiction of Joker is very good, and this depiction of Batman and Gotham and all of it is great. But also, it takes itself so seriously sometimes, and that's not a bad thing. But as somebody that has seen like where the genre has gone since then, and seeing like the colorful superhero costumes, big action adventure stuff, big sci-fi stuff out in space. It's like, yeah, we don't need all this stuff to be that grounded. A part of reading comic books is leaving the real world.
Yeah, that's fair because this stuff is still made for kids, but you wouldn't know it by some of the movies we've covered here.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said,
It's
I don't think that that makes this movie bad. I just think that it is some ways a pro and a con of this movie.
Well, so remind me what, because we've had this conversation about this film on another show, comparing it to another movie. And that's where you said that you didn't feel this was the greatest comic movie of all time, but you had another choice. But now I can't remember which one it was.
For my personal bias,
Mhm.
big Spider-Man fan, I still think
That's right.
Spider-Man 2 is the best comic book movie of all time. But that's just my personal opinion. Um, but you know, I'm sure most people aren't going to agree with me. But I just think that this movie, because in a lot of ways it's perfect for an audience that is not a comic book fan, that has no interest in reading weekly comics, that has no interest in some of the other source material. Um, as an isolated thing, as a movie that, like I said, has elevated beyond just the source material and the genre, for a lot of people, they're going to say that this is the best, and that's a fair argument.
I mean, look, as because I want to dive into this for a little bit here as we start off, because you know, Captain America: The Winter Soldier just jumped into my head
Yeah,
for whatever reason, because we're talking about movies grounded in reality. There's still fantastical things happening, but you know, Robert Redford in that movie and the espionage of Nick Fury and everything going on behind the scenes. Cap doesn't know what's going on, and the stuff between him and Black Widow. I mean, do you think, in your opinion, does that movie do a better job of saying, "Hey, this is a comic movie, but we're taking it seriously," versus this film by
uh,
comparison?
I would I would say that there are things about that movie, of course. Like you said, it's a very dark movie in some ways, but at the same time, you have things in that movie like Captain America taking down a jet by itself,
Hmm.
or you have
That's true.
him starting the movie with a darker suit, and then at the end of the movie going back to his suit from the first movie that's a little bit brighter.
Mhm.
And a lot of the Marvel movies, particularly that franchise, the Captain America franchise, it knows what it is, and it doesn't shy away from that. And
Mhm.
not to say that this movie shies away from being a Batman movie, but I feel like this franchise as a whole, it very much wants you to feel like this is uh, a grounded comic book movie. It's a comic book movie for adults, and it might have been. To be honest with you, it might be some of the talking points around this movie that I grew tired of after a while. It got a bit
Mhm.
pretentious after a while. Was that just me?
I'm okay. I was going to say I'm okay with that opinion
Yeah,
because it does. The term I'm coming up with in my head is Oscar dangling. Like they're dangling for an Oscar here in
yeah,
this movie. I think.
it got a bit. Some of the talk around the movie got a bit pretentious at some point, and
Mhm.
I think it got to a point where a lot of people that talked about it as it was its own separate thing. Like, oh, it's not like the rest of those movies. It's
Right.
just like, but yeah, but at the end of the day, it's still a comic book movie. Again, I know that a good part of the goal of this franchise and this movie was to exceed some of the limitations of the genre. But at the same time, it still exists in the same place. It's still a genre movie.
I think I said this in the Batman Begins episode that I stopped needing validation for what I love a long time ago because as comic book fans, we all on some level have been laughed at, have been mocked, have been teased, maybe not even to our faces. But
Mhm.
Phil, you and I both know the generation today has never had it better because it's okay to be a comic book fan now. You don't
Yes.
I'm sure there's ridicule to some point by, those jocks that never grow up, of course, and they're a dime a dozen, but so at one time for me, it was like, yeah, I need people to understand why I love it. I don't need anybody to do anything now. I'm at the age
No.
where I don't care about that, so I don't need this movie to forget, like you said, the source material. It's okay to be both and be a little bit of both at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, totally different time. Uh, Watching kids that were uh, at my age, they now have friends and they do so many things that at the time, like, no, I was just my lone friend that liked this. And they have
Mm,
their whole friend group that likes these things. Like, my nephew is big into Pokemon cards now. And I was just talking to him about going to tournaments and playing. I was like, this was not a thing for me when I was growing
mm.
up.
Yeah,
So
yeah, same.
it's cool. It's cool that, uh, kids can have these interests and it's more normalized now.
Yeah, again, you don't necessarily get beat up in a back alley or something, and they're taking your lunch money from you, you know?
Yeah,
Because yeah,
but it's also a part of how much all of this stuff has ingratiated itself into pop culture. I
yeah.
mean, the fact that to this day we're still having the revolving debate on was Team Cap right or Team Iron Man right on Twitter. I feel like it pops up every other week now, and that movie is almost 10 years old.
Yeah. I posted on Reddit, several months back about that. Who do you think was right? Was it Tony or was it Steve? I'm still getting comments on that post.
Yeah, that just
It's crazy.
man, that just shows you how much these things have become a big part of pop culture and how invested people are.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
And I'm never gonna knock that part about, like I said, this movie. I hope people don't take away from this. Boy, he sounds very negative on this movie. I really love this movie, but I
Mm.
also feel like there's a certain crowd and the way they talk about it that I grew very tired of at one point. Like, oh god, dude, like it's still a comic book movie, guys. Let's relax.
Still a
Like,
comic movie. Yeah, exactly. For a lot of the reasons we'll get into today, it's still a comic movie. Let's start off with the cast here because we gotta get to the meat of this, and that's cast member number 2 I'm gonna talk about. We'll probably spend a lot of time on him, but we gotta kick it off with Christian Bale. He's on his game in this movie. I don't know what your take is. Well, but I'll ask you here in a second. But like for me, he's great. I don't think he lost a step at all. I think this is a great continuation of the character. He's firmly entrenched in this war on crime. Of course, he ignores everything else in his life to do the Batman thing. That tracks. It makes perfect sense. He's still the smarmy Bruce Wayne at moments when he has to be in this movie. But Phil, I don't bump into anything in his performance. I think he's freaking great. I think the character is once again very well written. I think he is the backbone of this movie, as he should be as Batman. What do you think?
I think he's great in this movie, and I think that he doesn't get the credit he deserves for how good he is in this movie because some of the other characters took center stage at some points. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I really like his character arc of going from the first movie, of going away and finding the mission and finding how important it was to come back and save Gotham. But then in this movie, taking on everything that came with that, and taking on the fact that Batman is now a symbol, it's bigger than just him. And you have people that are now trying to take on his same mission and what
Mm-hmm.
it means to be Batman, the kind of hero that Gotham needs. And does Gotham need Bruce Wayne to just be Bruce Wayne, or does it need Gotham? Does Gotham need Batman to be Batman, or does it need Harvey Dent? And I think just that question throughout the movie is just such a great character arc for him. And by the end of it, masterpiece of a movie. Again, I can't say enough about just like how much I love this movie and how much it gets the acclaim it deserves. But just his entire arc and getting all the way to the end and getting the monologue from Gordon and how it perfectly answered the question.
Of course. And I was going to ask you, in the midst of getting a little, some of the stuff around this movie getting tiresome, are you tired of the whole "I'm not the hero Gotham deserves, but the one it needs," however it was said, and the whole, I mean, all that self-sacrificing stuff? Because man, you talk about getting played out through the years. It has so been played out, dude. It's wild.
Yeah, but that's what happens when things become as popular as this movie became. And
Sure.
I think that monologue is so good, but I think it also sparked a lot of things that got kind of tiresome after a while. But
Mhm.
I think that question and starting the movie off the way that they did, of you had the other guys that were trying to mimic Batman, and then that guy gets killed very gruesomely. By the way, uh, that was one of the most legitimate jump scares I've ever seen in a comic book movie. By the way, of Gordon and Harvey talking and the Batman body hitting that window, and I was just like, "Wow!"
Oh,
It just comes out of nowhere. It's
so
like,
good.
dude, is that really Batman? Wait, what?
Right.
uh, yeah, just a
Right.
brilliant move. But just setting that up and having, from the first movie, the citizens of Gotham idolizing him and idolizing a vigilante and raising this question of, is this the kind of person that this city should be praising? And by the end, when he's made out to be the villain, it's like, yeah, he has to be, because the city cannot idolize this guy. The city cannot think it's a good idea for everybody to go out and do what he does. He's taken on the sacrifice of him being the one that does it so nobody else has to do it.
Right. Because you're basically telling people it's okay to subvert the law in order to go out and try to do some good, and it's not okay to do that.
No, it's not. By the end of the movie, you're supposed to feel like, no, you can make a difference. Everybody can make a difference. But going out and doing what he does isn't necessarily the right way to make a difference just because that's the path he's chosen.
Mhm.
Um, but like I said, which is such a brilliant character arc, because you see by mid movie he's trying to get out. He's like, "Look, I didn't think that this would be this way. I thought that um, I would do this for a while, and then, but like seeing what Harvey's doing, like he's the real hero. You guys don't need me." And I think it's also partially seeing that he's getting everything that he technically wanted in the light, and he doesn't have to do it behind closed
Mhm.
doors. He got the girl. He's able to put uh his stamp on the war on crime, and he doesn't have to do all of this stuff behind scenes. He doesn't have to uh stay awake every night and wake up bruised and battered.
I love the idea, by the way, that he's going to hand off. He's going to hand off the mission. I didn't think we'd get there, but man, just I love again, Phil, self-sacrificing. Like, does this guy necessarily want to get punched in the mouth all the time or punch other guys in
No.
the mouth? I don't know. I mean, we've seen Batman portrayed as, hey, he kind of likes this. I don't think that this Bruce Wayne slash Batman enjoys anything of what he's doing. He just feels it's necessary.
Yeah, of course. The mission is necessary. But he, yeah, I think where he gets by midway in the movie, where it's like, I didn't think it would go this way. I didn't think that people would be dying because of me. I didn't think that people would be idolizing me and throwing their lives away and things like that. I never wanted any of that.
Mhm. Yeah. A lot of, like you said, a lot of heady subject matter uh,
Yeah.
kind of,
Y-
covered in this film. That's really one of them, too.
Yeah. But all the stuff he does as Bruce, there's so many scenes as Bruce that are just great. When he comes in and he gets off the helicopter and he has the three women with him and he does the toast and he's so fitting in that role as Bruce, and then when you see him walk out the door, and it's almost like you see him make the shift from Bruce back to Batman without putting on the cape, and he's standing out there alone, and he pours the champagne over the guardrail. So good.
That's really good. But yeah, I think once again Bell did a bang up job here. And I totally agree with you that he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And I would suspect that he would completely disagree with that if he heard me say it, because the guy he was playing next to, Phil, stole this movie like a proper villain would, because Heath Ledger as the Joker. And I couldn't wait to get to this because, again, Phil, he is the heart of this entire story. I've made no secret about the fact that when they first cast Heath Ledger, I was one of the first dudes to raise his hand and go, "Well, this is not going to work." I didn't see it. I didn't personally see it. I didn't dislike the guy as an actor, but I thought, nah, I don't need this. That's not. And that's from me being a comic book fan, but also remembering Nicholson in the '89 Batman film. But like, boy, was I wrong. I have no problem admitting when I'm in the wrong, Phil. I was totally wrong about this. This is a career defining performance by Heath Ledger, and sadly, his last of all time. Crazy tragedy. But, dude, talk to me about his impact on this movie, what Heath Ledger meant to this film, and everything that he did throughout it, really.
Yeah, this is like you said, a career defining role for him. Uh, in a lot of ways, he is really the highlight of this movie. He's a big part of why this movie was such a cultural phenomenon. And uh, man, it's a shame because, like you said, going into this, he did take on a lot of backlash from fans that didn't think he would be as good. I remember when they put out that whatever that code is, where you go to the website and every day they give you a small piece of the picture until you can all add them all up and it comes up to the first still of the Joker's face. You remember that?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I remember when we got the whole still and how it was just a black and white still and it had like his scars and the makeup it read where it's supposed to be, and I was like, huh, this looks interesting. I don't know. I didn't know how it was gonna work, but I was willing to find out. And man, it turns out he was an excellent Joker, uh, just equally uh, terrifying and psychotic and entertaining and fascinating to watch. Uh, all of his dialogue, like I said, could be a bit heady at times,
Hmm.
but he did such a great job of juggling all of the complex layers of this character. Um, from the moment we see him, I mean, when a movie starts and we see him standing on that corner holding the Joker mask, and like everything up to the reveal that was him behind the mask, so good. Uh, just so many things he does. They're just memorable. The pencil trick. Um, why so serious? Of course.
Yeah.
Every time he tells the story about his scars, which is, if I remember correctly, isn't that from the Grant Morrison stuff from Arkham Asylum?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
I believe it is, but he tells a different story every time, and I think that also fits the Joker character, right? And it also fits this idea of the movie of, hey man, when you're listening to this guy, sometimes it kind of feels like he's right,
Right.
which is this horrific phenomenon that's come with a lot of this stuff where people idolize the Joker character. It's just like, no, this guy's a monster. He's a bad guy. But he says things several times where it's like, oh, are they starting to put you in a place where you're supposed to be sympathetic of him? Because the first time he tells the story of his scars, he tells a story about his dad
Mhm.
and how his dad was abusive. And it's like, oh, are they immediately setting up where you're supposed to see this guy as a sympathetic figure? And by the second time he tells the story about his scars, it's like, oh no, you're just like completely nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Hey,
just
look,
completely nuts and he's just a hypocrite.
he is, and I'm with you on what you said because they've done it with the Joker, with Rorschach, and with Thanos. Like, I think he was right. Turns out he was. No, he's not. These are villains. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff makes me crazy, man. A villain is a villain is a villain. Hannibal Lecter is not cool. Hannibal
Yes.
Lecter was not right. He's a freaking villain. What are we doing here?
Yes, it's definitely been one of those things with Rorschach a lot over the time, and Rorschach's my favorite character from Watchmen. I've always
Mhm.
liked Rorschach. I've always liked a lot of the way he was written. Um, there are bits of Watchmen that I can quote word for word that are Rorschach dialogue, but
Mm.
Rorschach's a murderer.
Yes. Yes.
He's a murderer. He's not a good person.
Not at all. Not anyone to be worshipped. And of course, the same is true for Joker here. What do you think about the choice to never reveal who he truly is? Because I freaking love. I think it's a master stroke. We never discover who this guy really is.
I think that was the right way, and I think that that's how Joker should always be used. That he there is no there is no story. He's just a complete force of chaos. He's a complete maniac. There is no answer. There is no riddle to be solved. There is no sympathetic figure behind this. This guy is just a complete psychotic villain. He's a monster. Like you're not supposed to there's not supposed to be a, oh well, this is the thing that made him him. And I mean, I know that there has been stories. I know there has been origin stories for him, but I think he works best as a character when you don't know because that makes him even scarier. It also
Mhm.
fits what he says in this movie of, hey, anybody can be like me. Anybody's one bad day away from being like me. And for most of this movie, we kind of believe him because we see so many examples of like, man, I don't know, man, Gotham might be beyond saving, man, because there's so many terrible people in the city.
Yes. So many terrible people. Yeah. And you know, the references that you mentioned, some of the things they took inspiration from, Killing Joke is
Yes,
represented in here. It's done so well. It is pitch perfect. It is great. Like them in that jail cell or in that holding room, dude, it's so good. Like I can't get over how good that stuff is. And by the way, kids, Alan Moore and Brian Boland, creative team on The Killing Joke, freaking
yes,
fantastic book. God, dude, what a classic that is.
yes. I, not a coincidence that Alan Moore wrote both Rorschach and wrote one of the seminal Joker stories. And he also espoused what you said earlier of like, hey guys, you're not supposed to like this character. Like any of you guys that like stop me on the street and say that I idolize Rorschach, like, okay, cool, great. Never speak to me again. See you later.
Yeah, it's true. As eccentric as Alan Moore is, I mean, I've kind of always been in Alan Moore's corner, Phil. I have to admit, I always have. I'm always with the creator before I am the company. It's just.
I I love a lot of Alan Moore's work, and I
Mhm,
find idealistically I agree with him more than I disagree with him.
mhm.
But Alan Moore, the curmudgeon, has become a bigger legend than his work sometimes, and I think that's kind of disappointing, and I don't think that he's helped that in some ways. Um, and that doesn't mean that some of the things that he stayed put on and he's dug his feet in the sand on that he's wrong. I just I hate sometimes that side of him has become more famous than his work.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you either because I totally get where you're coming from. Like,
Yeah. it's somewhat the same way with Frank Miller. I think some of
Just gonna say that. Yeah.
the nuttier side of Frank Miller has become more famous than like his best work, and it's unfortunate, man.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, in terms of Heath Ledger's performance, even Sir Michael Caine had the same opinion. Now, let's see if you agree with this. Uh, in his opinion, Heath Ledger beat the odds and topped Jack Nicholson's Joker from Batman from '89. He said, quote, Jack was like a clown figure, benign but wicked, maybe a killer old uncle. He could be funny and make you laugh. He's gone in a completely different direction to Jack. He's like a really scary psychopath. He's a lovely guy, and his Joker is going to be a heck of a revelation in this picture, end quote. Do you think one tops the other, or should we just say that they're both just two separate performances?
I mean, I think he absolutely topped him in terms of like the accolades that he got, and in terms of just the amount of stuff he was able to convey in this movie. Because Michael Caine's right. At points, he's very terrifying. I mean, I remember watching it the first time, and we see when he's got the guy that dresses up as Batman hostage, and how terrifying it is when he's just like playing with him and toy with him, and then he gets for real very fast, like hair trigger.
Yes.
When he yells at him, he's like, "Look at me!" Terrifying.
Oh, it is. It's like a horror movie. Yeah.
Terrifying. But the whole time, like he manages to go back and forth effortlessly. He manages to do all the exposition and stuff in the movie very, very well without it feeling uh, out of place. I mean, even like you said in the interrogation scene, he's saying all this stuff, and none of it feels like, nah, I'm not invested in any of it. It's great. He really carries those scenes.
He really does. He's so good.
I mean, but man, he's managed to do so many other things that are like iconic. I mean, I think of him walking down that street with the nurse outfit on, banging on that explosive device, trying to get it to work. And then when it finally does work, he walks away. I mean, even when he's in there, when he goes to talk to Harvey and he goes to take off the mask, and the face he makes when he does it,
Yes.
it's so great, man.
Because he's like, hi. Yeah, dude.
It's so great. He just, man, so incredibly entertaining. Like I said, terrifying, uh, thought provoking, just a great character all around.
The that scene is terrifying when he comes out of the hospital. Like, I remember being in the theater when he's walking out and the smaller explosions are going off, and the way he's walking, there were people around me laughing and chuckling. I was creeped out because I'm like, if I saw this guy in broad daylight, I'm calling the cops, man. Like, this is scary to me. I freaking love that scene. It's awesome.
Well, it's great because his whole role is he's got this big smile on, and he's got this makeup on, and he's supposed to be like this joke. And yeah, everybody's laughing at it. He's making all of this violence and terror and stuff palatable for people in some ways, but he did blow up an entire hospital.
He did blow up an entire hospital.
He could have potentially killed thousands of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, kids, the Joker wasn't right.
Yeah. And I mean, there's several things that he does where it's like, oh my God, that's like I said, the pencil trick. The pencil trick is funny, but it's like, hey, you just murdered a guy.
He did. I'm sure you've heard this. That hospital scene where he can't get the remote to work, that was a real reaction because the explosion did not go off the way it was supposed to. So they kept it on film.
Yes.
That's awesome.
But yeah, he's so great, man. Just so dynamic. Man, I remember seeing the trailer and he's walking down Van Buren. I'm sorry, guys. I'm from Chicago, so the city, like, I'm thinking like the street, because he's in the financial district. He's walking down that street, and Batman's flying at him with the bat pod, and he's like, come on, hit me. Great,
so good.
Just so great. There's so many things that he does in this movie that are like either they make me laugh or it's like, oh, this guy is absolutely out of his mind. I mean, him jumping in the truck. He's like, move over. I want to drive.
Yeah. By the way, that scene, the truck flipping over, the iconic moment, and like you said, the bat pod coming straight at him. I was a little disappointed that like Batman didn't have a plan. he's obviously not going to hit the Joker. So instead, he just wipes out and ends up on his back on the street. Like, that's your plan? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. You
I
couldn't have
mean,
shot a grappling hook and tripped the guy or something? I don't know.
I think it's such a great kind of metaphor for all of their conflicts moving forward is that he kept reacting to Joker, and Joker just basically kept playing chicken with him, like trying to force his hand, like, hey, what are you going to do? I'm just going to keep getting worse and worse. So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? You're not going to do anything? And it's just like when he throws Rachel out the window. It's like, hey, what was your plan when you came in here? You thought you were just going to come in here, beat him up?
Exactly. Yeah. What was the plan?
It's the same way with that. It's like he just reacted to Joker. What did you think? You were just going to run up on him and he was going to cower in fear of you? No, he's not like the rest of these guys.
Joker is it fair to say he throws Batman off his game in this movie quite a bit?
Yes, he calls his bluff several times because several times in the movie, he's showing all the mobsters that are afraid of him. He's like, hey, man, I know why you guys are doing these meetings during the day. You guys are afraid of that guy. He's looking around like, I'm not afraid of this guy at all. I think all of this is funny.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
What is he going to do? Kill me?
Right.
And several times he calls his bluff like, what are you going to do? Are you going to kill me? I want you to. No, you're not. I know you're not because you got nothing. And that's what makes him so great throughout this movie. He calls his bluff several times, and several times he catches them like, oh man. Because man, he's got the rule. He's that's throughout the movie that he's not going to kill any of these guys. But Joker's kind of like, hey, if you're not going to kill me, then I'm just going to keep getting worse. What are you going to do? It's kind of like that kid where I'm not, of course, condoning spanking your kids if you're not into that, but that kid, if you know, hey, my parents not gonna punish me, man, what are you gonna do?
Right. Yeah.
I'm about to draw on the walls. I'm about to stay out all night. I'm about to do whatever I want. What are you gonna do to me?
I mean, I've worked in an environment before where being written up was used as a threat so often it lost all impact at some point. Because at some point it's like, you know what, write me up. I don't even care anymore. Like,
Yeah, of course.
stop waving the gun if you're not going to pull the trigger. That's what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think without understanding that ideology, some of those scenes do kind of fall flat of him just racing at him with the bat pod and then wiping out. It's just like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I think the point of it is that Joker really called his bluff several times where he's just like, you're not going to really do anything. Because you're just a man in that thing. You're not a demon. You're not a monster.
Right. He sees right through him.
There's a great Joker book. I can't remember which one it is. But he has a monologue with Batman where he says, you know, everything you did, I would have bought into it. But you leave that little slip of your face where I can see you're human. And he was like, that's why I never really bought in, because you always let us know that you want people to know that you're human.
Wow, great point. Joker was right after all, Phil. I was wrong. No. We've heard a lot of stories, Phil. I'm sure you have. Everybody has, about how Heath Ledger prepared for this role. The story goes that he hid away in a motel room for about 6 weeks. During his stay, he dived into the psychology of the character. He devoted himself to developing the Joker's every tick, namely the voice and the laugh. And for the voice, Ledger's goal was to create a tone that didn't echo the work Jack Nicholson did in his performance of the Joker. Smart move. His interpretation of the Joker's appearance was primarily based on the chaotic, disheveled look of a punk rocker, Sid Vicious, combined with the psychotic mannerisms of Malcolm McDowell's character, Alex DeLarge, from A Clockwork Orange. And Phil, also, I got to throw this in. If you've never seen that Tom Waits interview from 1979, Heath Ledger found that interview. If you think he didn't, every one of you are crazy and lost your minds. Mm-hmm. Dude, go look up that interview. That's Heath Ledger as the Joker from 1979. It is absolutely spot on. If you close your eyes, you'll think someone's doing an impression of Heath Ledger as the Joker.
Boink Studios is the home of Tom Clark's main event, Tom Clark's 6M podcast, and Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast. Visit the site today for links to every podcast platform, social media, special announcements, and a lot more. Check out the site and bookmark today, boinkstudios.com.
His commitment to making this character different is something that he should have been applauded for, and he was. I mean, he was already a star, but like he's a legend because of this movie, man. Because Phil, we talk a lot about how they ground this franchise, this trilogy in reality. Is it too much? Is it whatever? It's a comic book film, but like he took this role seriously, man. He could have said, it's a paycheck, it's a comic movie, I don't really care. He could have phoned it in and probably done fine, but he went the extra mile, man. I think that's what sets his performance apart from a lot of others now.
Yes, fully immersed himself in the role, um, which is excellent and traumatic at the same time.
Yeah.
Really hate that he didn't get to be here to see all of the flowers that he got after the fact. It just kind of says something about violence and mental health and crime in the world that in some ways it's such a big part of pop culture and it's such a big part of the world we live in.
Mhm.
But it isn't normal. It's not like something, it's like a lot of things that we want to applaud him for being able to do in this movie. There are people in the world that are like really sick and really not in a great place. And, trying to get yourself in the mind of somebody like that, it couldn't be easy.
Yeah, and the official story is that it was a drug toxicity on January 22nd, 2008 that killed him, unfortunately. And it says supposedly he suffered from insomnia throughout his life. He would often take sleeping pills together with other prescription drugs, something his sister had actually warned against the night before his death. Unfortunately, the mix he took on that night proved to be a fatal combination. And
Uh, ugh.
Phil, the rumors that he was damaged mentally and emotionally by playing the Joker, it's all hogwash. He had a blast playing the Joker, man. People just they want to believe what they want to believe. You know what I mean? They write their own stories in their own heads sometimes.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I think that it's kind of the mythos that goes with Joker. I think people want to make this character more powerful than he is outside of the actual source material.
Mhm.
But I just say that just to get in the mindset of playing this role and immersing himself in a role the way he did, it couldn't have been easier. It had to been a lot that goes with that, and a lot of people that are very creative, a lot of people that are like that think that highly about getting into a role. Um, there's a lot of torment that comes with that, and I don't think
Mhm.
that just came with this role. I think there's a lot of torment that comes with being an artist sometimes. And I think a lot of people that are very good at something, whether that be acting or making music or painting or whatever, a lot of those people have a lot of trauma, and a lot of those people are not they're not happy. They're not living like a very comfortable life.
Mm.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I could see it. And man, when you say like he had insomnia, um, I've had insomnia for most of my life. Most of my college life, I did not sleep well,
Wow.
and I was a big sleeping pill guy at one point. But at some point, I just was like, I don't like anything about this. I don't like how it makes me feel, because if you've taken sleeping pills, you know how abrupt it is. Like if you take sleeping pills, it's like yeah, it works, but it's kind of scary, like being dependent on them, and not just at one point being dependent on them, but it's like, okay, this isn't enough. I need something that's stronger.
Mhm.
And it's just not a good place to be, man. It's just that's why a lot of times when I couldn't sleep, after I just was like, I don't want to take medication to sleep anymore, I would just have to just settle in and just be up because I'd rather do that than be dependent on any kind of drug.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. A couple of the things here is that back to the Michael Caine comments from earlier. Supposedly, he had not met Heath yet, and the first time he met him was in the penthouse scene when he's in full makeup, and it actually scared him a little bit. Great story. I love that actually. Very cool. This sequel takes place roughly 9 months after Batman Begins, and we were talking about the street scene earlier because kids, if you listen to Batman Begins episode, you know that Chicago basically is subbing for Gotham City here.
Mm-hmm.
When filming a chase scene on Lake Street, the Chicago PD received several calls from concerned citizens stating the police were involved in a vehicle pursuit with a dark vehicle of unknown make or model. Great. The Tumblr. It's freaking great, dude. Are you kidding me? Oh, that's awesome. How would you not know at that point, by the way, Phil, they're filming the Batman movie? Wouldn't that be all over town?
Yeah, I don't know how people wouldn't know that. I have to assume you could see the cameras and stuff, right?
I would guess. Yeah. Good call. This we talked about the financial accolades and the money this movie made. My God in heaven, it surpassed Batman Begins at the domestic box office in only 6 days of release.
Yeah.
Dude.
Which, I mean, some of that is the success of Batman Begins. I think
Sure.
a lot of us didn't expect Batman that Begins to be nearly as good as it was. And I think that it did so well, not just in theaters, but uh, on Netflix and this wasn't as big of a streaming market then, but that was still
Oh,
at a
yeah.
time where people actually got their DVDs and stuff in the mail through Netflix. But it did so well on DVD and stuff after being in a theater. I think that's part of why Dark Knight was so good. And I'm sure, of course, when you add Joker to it, that adds a completely different fan base and a crowd that's going to come out to see it. But I do think that Batman Begins deserves some credit for how well this movie did.
Mm. That's a good call. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Just, again, the butt ton of money this movie made is just, it's mind blowing. I mean, now, Phil, we hear about movies making $1 billion, and I'm not going to say we don't blink an eye at it. Of course, it's still a big deal, but this was 2008, man.
It definitely was a big deal at that time for superhero movies. You
Mhm.
didn't see that. I mean, of course, Avengers, made $1 billion. There were a few other ones afterwards, but that was a big deal for a comic book movie at the time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair. Um, it's easy for us to keep gushing over Heath and keep because the guy freaking earned it because he is fantastic in this movie. But I want to talk about the other big bad that is not a big bad when this movie begins, and this is Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent slash Two Face. I mean, Phil, if a lot of people believe, including Sir Michael Caine, that Heath Ledger performance he topped Nicholson, and maybe Ledger's the best Joker. For me, Phil, it's Mark Hamill, but that's me. But can we say that Aaron Eckhart is the best depiction of Two-Face that we've seen to this point?
Absolutely. I mean, the animated series, it's kind of hard to top how good Two Face was in that, but
Mhm.
no, in any other medium, it's Aaron Eckhart by far. He's so good as Harvey Dent, and it's it's such a good story that they tell with him. You fully believe in Harvey Dent at some point. I mean, of course, we know the source material, so we know what happens to him. But that's what makes it so heartbreaking and traumatic when he is ultimately corrupted by the city.
Mhm.
Because you want to believe after the first movie, because that's really the idea at the end of the movie is that not everybody can be corrupted by this city. There are people like Gordon. There are people like Rachel, and uh, to get to this movie and get this beacon of hope in Harvey Dent and go, oh, this is going to be the guy that is really going to save us, and even he could be corrupted. It's a sad story. It's very poignant in a lot of ways.
Think it was the right choice, by the way, at the end? The Batman's choice. You think you didn't have another option? Was that the right thing to do? It seems like it was.
Yeah, but I've always read it like because they did the scene earlier, uh, where Batman had the guy over the ledge. Isn't it the guy from the Falcone crime family?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So he has him hanging over the ledge, and he goes, huh, "Throwing me from this length isn't gonna kill me." He's like, "I'm betting on it." And then we have that very graphic scene of him landing on both feet and breaking his legs. Um,
Yes.
and so I've always read that scene to say, "Oh, well, Harvey's not really dead. He didn't fall that far."
Mm.
I think Batman read it like, nah, he might survive that fall, but I don't want to make that take that chance with this kid's life. But Harvey might survive this fall.
Mm. So we know he didn't, but like the way it's written, Phil, you can't really say he's not dead, right? You can't really bring, I mean, you could, but isn't his impact lessened to some degree if he comes back in the third film?
I think so, but I have many problems with the third movie. Uh,
That's
um,
fair.
yeah, but man, Aaron Eckhart is great in this. He gives really one of the lasting quotes from the movie of when he's having the debate at dinner with Bruce and Rachel,
Hmm.
and he gives the either you die a hero or you live long enough to be the villain, and that is really one of enduring quotes from this movie. And he was the guy that said it, not Joker, not Bruce, Harvey Dent. And I don't think people think about that enough.
I've heard it repeated so often, it's crazy, but it's so good. It's very poignant, as we said. It's again, it's one of the things that grounds this movie, Phil. There's many things in this movie during the course of this runtime here that absolutely grounds this movie, and that's one of them. Is like,
Yeah.
look, let's be honest. He's a little bit too good to be true. He's a little too John Wayne in some respects. I mean, the guy pulls a gun on him in court and he takes it away like he's John Wick or something, as if nothing can flinch this guy. And I'm like, come on. So there's moments, but I'm like, it is still a comic book movie, Phil. It's not
Yes.
supposed to be completely accurate, you know?
Yes. But I think that that's part of his charm early on,
Mhm.
that he does seem too good to be the true, and I think that's why even Bruce buys in, and he's like, "No, this is the guy. This is the guy that's gonna save Gotham, not me."
Mhm.
Because in himself, he sees all of his flaws. He sees that he could never do certain things that he's able to do. He can never reach people the way that he does. But also, you could see the flaws in him early, and I think that that's also the excellent thing that they do with his character in this movie. Um, there are bits when uh he's going a little bit too far, and it's like, are you really this beacon of hope? The way they film the scene where he catches the guy, and he tries to interrogate him, and he tried to flip the coin then, and
Yeah.
Batman stops him, and the way it's lit and where the entire side of his face is dark and you can't see
Ooh.
it. Um, it took me like maybe the second viewing when I watched it, I was like, man, the way they light his face and like the way he like backs into the darkness in some of the scenes, just perfect metaphor.
So good. That is David Desmalchin, who has walked between DC Universe and Marvel Universe as well. He's done a lot of stuff, man. He's an Ant-Man.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even just that interrogation, this is just such a good movie, such a well written movie. The
Mhm.
interrogation where Harvey is interrogating this guy and he's telling him, "You're not going to get any information out of this guy. He's a schizophrenic. What do you think you're going to get out of this guy?" And it just shows how much Joker gets him off his game, because it's the same thing you could tell Bruce in that room where he's trying to beat him up and get information out of him. It's like, you're not going to get information out of this guy. He's a complete nut job.
Mhm. Well, I mean, it's the hardest villain to beat because
Yeah.
there is no, I mean, Joker had a plan. In the end, there was a plan, but we didn't think there was for the longest time because it just seemed like, yeah, he called himself a chaos agent, which is 100% true.
Yes. And I mean, even a big part of him calling himself a chaos agent, a lot of what he does and says are lies. They're lies.
Yeah,
I mean, he wants you to think he doesn't have a plan, but of course he does.
sure.
He wants you to think that, oh, I just want to disrupt things, but that's not entirely true.
Mm, yeah, and he does care about his own hide, even though there's moments where it's like, I don't, it's like, well, this guy doesn't care if he kills him.
Yeah,
I do see some sense of self-preservation, Phil, in as much as he always tries to get away, you know?
of course. The reason he can keep dangling that in front of Batman is because he's like, I know you're not gonna kill me.
Mhm. And again, if you're going to have two big bads in the same movie, Joker and Two Face are a heck of a way to go. Uh, we had some of the usual suspects, of course, for Joker, Robin Williams, Sean Penn. Paul Bettany, Johnny Depp, Crispin Glover, who I have always said would make a great Joker. Vincent Castle and Christopher Walken were
Yeah.
among the names thrown around for Joker. Heath Ledger was always Christopher Nolan's first choice. And in terms of Aaron Eckhart's casting, I don't have that in front of me, but there's a few different things about him here, Phil. Is that one thing? Of course, it's all CG. His injury is all CG, obviously, because Christopher Nolan felt no matter what we do to his face, it's just going to be a guy's face with prosthetics on top, and that's going to be obvious. And also, he encouraged him to not make any slurping noises, don't give the character any tics, because it's going to be more unsettling that he's just still a human guy with this horrific injury. That way, it's not clownish at all. I think that was a great move, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've seen enough comic book movies where they try and do two big bads, or they try to do, three villains, and we technically get three villains because we do get Scarecrow early in the movie.
That's right.
But he perfectly fits the tone of this movie. There's no other Batman villain that perfectly fits the idea of the duality of man than Two-Face. And I think a big part of this movie is just that everybody has more than one side to them. Everybody has a dark side to them. And on a wrong day, you might indulge in things that you shouldn't do, but we all make choices. And our choices are really what define us.
Yeah, for sure. What's the quote? It's not who we are, but what we do that defines us. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And this movie very much tests that theory in a lot of ways.
It does. For sure. We mentioned Michael Caine, of course. He's back as Alfred Pennyworth, doing another bang-up job. He's always great. He's still great here. Of course, we've got the great Morgan Freeman is back as well. Gary Oldman has returned as Commissioner Gordon. There's a heck of a trio there, Phil, that we gushed over in the first movie as well. We should have. What do you think, real quick, what do you think about the idea of the whole, Gordon is dead bit? When you first saw this movie, did you think there was a possibility that they had actually killed Gordon, or did you fall for any of that?
I didn't fall for it, but it was such a shocking twist that I was like, and they showed us the body. That was the trick. So when they showed us the body, I was like, they really killed Gordon. And so when he does pop up and he hits the "got you, son of a bitch," I was like, yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, very, very good twist. But yeah, Gary Oldman is so good in this movie. I think that he's even better in this movie than he was in the first movie. He gets more material to work with, and man, he just does so many great. There's so many great scenes with him in this movie. I think he almost single-handedly makes the final showdown between Batman and Two-Face feel even more realistic, because he's just like, when he's begging and pleading with Harvey, it feels so believable. He does such great acting in that scene. Every time I watch it, I'm just so surprised just how good he is in that scene, where he's just like, Harvey, man, don't take that gun off of my son, please. Don't. I did it. It's my fault. Don't hurt him.
Oh yeah,
it's so good. You could really like feel all the emotion in that character in that moment. You could feel everything. He's just like that. Just come on, man. It like he goes from at some point pleading with him, like, and you could feel all of the pathos, and then you could feel the frustration where he's like, God, take that gun off of him. Stop.
Yeah, because the stress, dude, that is a very, very powerful moment. And that kid, I don't know, in real life, that kid is probably bawling like a baby as well as he should be.
Yes.
But man, dude, that's a very powerful scene. You're right about that.
Yeah, but I think, man, he's so good in that scene. And Eckhart is good in that scene as well. He's very cold, and he is completely devoid of the character that we get early in the movie. He almost seems like a different person.
Yeah.
That's just a, testament to how good he was as well.
I mean, the cast by the second movie, Phil, like, these guys know who they are. They know who they're portraying. Seems like they're comfortable in the roles. You've got the same screenwriters back. You've got the same director. You've got, the same sets, I'm sure. You've got the same characters. I mean, you got a few different ones, a few new ones here, but again, dude, Gary Oldman feels like Commissioner Gordon. He becomes commissioner in this movie, as we alluded to in the first one. Loeb does not fare well.
Yeah.
It's
Go
the
figure.
end for him. Yeah.
Loeb was not gonna last throughout this entire thing. The second we saw another commissioner, we're like, oh yeah, this guy's not gonna have a happy ending.
He ain't gonna retire with a gold watch. So
No. But yeah, man, can't say enough great things about Gary Oldman in this. I mean, he transitions from being very charming and likable. I mean, when he walks in there and goes to arrest all of the mobsters, he's like, man, boy, that guy looks good on a tube, doesn't he?
it's great. It's so good.
Yeah, he's great. All of his back and forth with Batman when they're private, um, so good. When they have the meeting towards the beginning of the movie, just great stuff. He has great chemistry with Christian Bale, um, and man, it would have been very easy for that monologue to not work at the end of the movie. But the monologue works because he does such a great job of acting in it.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, it could have been clunky. It could have been, this is too far over the deep end. But Gary Oldman's just fantastic, man.
Yeah, but man, man, one of the triumphs of this movie is that this movie ends on a very sad note. It's a very dark movie throughout, but even the end of it is very sad because Batman essentially does not win. He basically loses. And his monologue of describing him towards the end and watching just like him having this monologue over Batman running away and getting on the Batpod. And by the end of it, and he perfectly expresses why Gotham needs him. And by the end of it, when you see him like riding off to sunset, and he says, he's the hero we need. And when he lands on the Dark Knot line, this very sad movie, you want to like yell and like triumph for this guy because it's such a great moment.
It is, man. Because they bring it home, because they deliver on the plot points, and they, the characters feel, whether it's a comic book movie or not. Anytime you get characters portrayed as they're written, when they stay true to the source material, the movie tends to work. Like, maybe not all the time, but again, Phil, like the performances in this movie bring it home for me.
Yeah. I've seen this movie multiple times in theaters, and I've been in theaters multiple times where by the end of the monologue, the crowd like starts wooing and cheering because it's just such a great moment. And like I said, it's such a sad movie, but you get this great, and even the monologue is very dark, but you get to the end of this monologue and it just feels like such a beautiful moment.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so good. We also said, of course, that Morgan Freeman is back. For the first time, Lucius Fox has a moment of getting rubbed the wrong way by what Bruce is asking him to do. But of course, by the end, it's fixed and it's great. And it's like, it's just such a good move.
Man, yeah, just his delivery of that line when he comes in there and sees what he did with his sonar tech, and he's like, "This is wrong."
Yeah.
It's like, I don't. Long as this machine is at Wayne Enterprises, I will not be. And yeah, even when Bruce reassures him, like, just put your name in at the end. And man, even that is part of the monologue of when he's going over the monologue and how Lucius is watching the machine destroy itself at the end, and he's like, of course, why would I have ever doubted him?
Sure.
And I forget the line that's over it, that goes over that, but the line from the monologue is something like when someone reassures you who they really are. And it's just such a great fitting place to end this stuff with Lucius and Bruce. Well, Lucius and Bruce, sorry. And because I mean, it's such an interesting relationship in a lot of ways, because he's lying to Lucius every step of the way. Lucius knows he's lying to him, but there's an understanding that he's lying for the better good. And so when we first get that inkling that he's not telling him something, it's just like, well, why would you do that and not tell me? Because early in the movie, when he tells him that he moved the R&D department, and he's like, I didn't know about that. And he's like, yeah, just trust me on this. I'm running this one close to the vest. And it's like, wait a minute. And that's the first moment in the movie where Lucius is like, wait a minute, this guy's been lying to me all this time. How do I know I can really trust him?
I mean, he's not wrong, but Phil, the more that Bruce tells him, the more he's putting Lucius in danger.
Yes.
Because right now, Lucius can claim he does it well up until the moment when he's in full Batman costume standing next to him, of course. But up until then, he could claim, well, Mr. Wayne never told me what he was using this for, and I didn't ask. He's my boss.
Yes. But again, I think there's this understanding between them from the first movie and up to that scene where somebody else tells him something that he didn't know. It's just like, well, wait a minute. This guy's been lying all this time. What else are you hiding if you hit that?
Right, of course. Yeah. But it's like plausible deniability, right? Again, like if you tell him everything, he's gonna know everything.
Yeah, of course he don't want to know everything, and that's part of their relationship.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's also part of his relationship with Gordon because if Gordon really wanted to, he can look into who he is, but he doesn't want to.
Right. It shouldn't be that. I mean, another problem with not covering that mouth
Mhm.
is that you are going to leave DNA behind. If you yell enough on somebody, if you get close enough, there's DNA, Phil. Like, I don't know. I'm the nerd that thinks about weird stuff. Just like whenever I see a character in a movie, like a comic book character or whatever, with fingerless gloves, I'm always like, not worried about fingerprints, are we? Okay,
No,
that's fine.
guess not. There's a very, very good episode of the animated series where Scarecrow uses the fear toxin on Barbara Gordon, and she has this whole hallucination that she gets killed in costume. Have you seen it?
I don't think so.
She has this whole hallucination that she dies in costume, and Jim finds her and he unmasks her and finds out that she's been Batgirl all this time and she's
Mhm.
dying. And so before we find out by the end of the episode this hallucination, we think that this is real and she's dead. And uh that when he finds out, he immediately goes into the fit of rage and he goes on this entire manhunt against Batman. And in this manhunt, he reveals he's known all this time that he's Bruce Wayne. So
Oh,
he goes to the mansion and he goes down into the Batcave and he goes to arrest him. It's so good. There's a great scene where there's a cop that's getting ready to shoot Bruce while he's getting away, and Alfred jumps on him and he gets arrested. It's so good. Oh, it's
wow.
so good. But by the end of the episode, we find out it's been a hallucination all the time. Barbara's not actually dead. This is just her fear of what she thinks could happen if she actually died. And so she has a meeting at the end of the episode with Jim, and she goes to tell him something. She's like, "Dad, I want to tell you something." He's like, "Nope, don't worry about it. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of all of you." And he basically tells her in that moment without telling her that he knows.
Oh man. That's awesome. Can't believe I've not seen that actually. Yeah, I mean, look, Gordon's the best cop in the city. The fact that he makes out like he doesn't know is surprising to me. I mean, it's clear by the time The Dark Knight Returns gets here, Frank Miller book, that of course he knows. Of course he's known for years. Look, we've talked about the regular cast that return. We talk about the new folks who've shown up. We got to talk about Maggie Gyllenhaal, and we discussed some of this in the Batman Begins episode. I mean, been a while since I've seen The Dark Knight. Again, she's a fine actress. I've seen her in stuff that I enjoy her in. It's not working for me here, and I don't know if I'm comparing her to Katie Holmes, or if it's the dialogue, or if it's the way she delivers it. No disrespect, but for me personally, I don't know how much of this I'm feeling. If there is a weak link in this movie, Phil, I believe it could be her. What's your take on this?
I think that she's good in this movie. But it's like I said when we recorded the one on Batman Begins. This movie, it misses Katie Holmes in a lot of ways because it misses that familiarity that we have with Katie Holmes in the role. I think
Mhm,
like her death, I think it hits totally different if this is somebody that we've known since the first movie.
mhm.
Because in this movie, um yeah, it still hits because it's the same character, but I think if you have Katie Holmes' face and everything to add to it, it hits completely different.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem that I'm going through here is I'm not believing her. And dude, the decision to the choice that was made by the end of this movie that she chooses Harvey Dent over Bruce Wayne. Like, are you buying that? Does that make sense to you? Were you here for it or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh, I think they make some choices with her characters that I think are very smart. Um, because the thing that always has made sense in reading that letter is and man, reading the letter after she's dead is just such a
Mm,
great way to, man, just such a great moment in the movie. And letting her die with Bruce thinking like she was gonna choose me, like I could have left this life. Man, Alfred deciding to burn that letter too, just so good. Um,
very good.
but no, her choice always made sense to me because she was right. Her choice in saying that, at some point, I thought that you would be able to live without Batman, but I realized that you never would be able to. And she's absolutely right. He
Mm.
was never, ever going to just leave the mission. The mission was always going to be more important to him than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair because, like we've established before, he can't have any other life. If he tries to leave, kind of like Mask of the Phantasm, he's going to get pulled back in. Something will pull him back in, dude.
Yeah, there was never going to be a point in his life where he could not be Batman.
Mm.
And that's we'll get into that when we talk about the third movie. That's some of my issues with the movie. There's some bits of it that don't work. But no, her choice always made sense. I think that she is good in aspects of this movie. I don't think that she's bad in this movie. I just think that it's very jarring from going from Katie Holmes to not having Katie Holmes and not having
Mhm.
any explanation other than, oh, in the real world, she was just recast. But I do think she's good in this movie. She, there are bits of it that kind of are funny to me that are unintentionally funny. I don't know why when she's sliding down that window when she gets thrown out the building. I don't know why. A part of me chuckles at it. I don't know if it's her delivery of the yell and everything, but I can't chuckle at it every time.
Oh man. I mean, did you see her getting killed here? Because I did not see that coming.
No, oh man, the way they killed her was just so.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, but that's why I said I think she did some great acting. And the scene where she's when she's tied up in there with the barrels of oil, and she says, and she's really basically expressing her love to him, like Harvey, like you have to go on, you have to move on without me, and she's just like, no, they're coming to save me, and I don't want them to. And the whole time we're thinking she's right, they're coming to save her. And so when Batman comes around the corner, I think it's Gordon, right, that says that we bet everything on him.
Yeah.
We bet everything on Harvey. He literally bet everything on Harvey because I mean, this is his everything. This is the girl that he's known since he was a kid. This is the only woman that he really thought about leaving the life about to be with. And he bet everything on saving him instead of her. And man, that is again one of the most heartbreaking things about Harvey being corrupted by his city is that, man, he bet everything on him and it went terribly, terribly wrong. That scene of her saying, Harvey, it's okay, and then immediately blowing up, like I was speechless when it happened. I was like,
And of course, he knows that, Batman's got a thing for her, I guess, and he's figured out. So of course he's going to lie about who's where because he wants her to die.
yes,
Because he knows Batman will get to Dent before the cops can get to her.
yes,
Oof.
yeah, Joker, boy, oof, what a very horrible
Yeah.
thing to do to someone. But yeah, he of course has figured it out, and he's like, oh, of course, well, I'm gonna make you think she's here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Because he's still trying to prove the point that everybody is a horrible day away from being like me. And if I take her away from you, what will that do to you?
Wow. Yeah. Like in the grand scheme of things, this Rachel Dawes character, like I'm not disputing how much she means to him, and I'm blanking on the third movie. We'll have to watch it and review it as well for me to really remember everything that happened. I don't remember how much she's even referenced in the third movie, or if she even is. Tom Clark 6M Podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Reddy's Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark 6M Podcast sent you. But in the grand scheme of things, is this the most impactful relationship that Bruce has had, that a Bruce Wayne has had on the big screen? Because you can't really say Vicky Vale was much of an impactful relationship. Catwoman lasted one movie, then she was gone.
Yeah,
Like, this has to be it, right?
They don't reference any of the Vicky Vale stuff much in the second movie. They bring it up as a joke in the second movie, but they don't reference it other than that. And then the stuff with Catwoman is, like you said, a one and done. We don't get much about that in the third movie. So I would say that this is very impactful on him because he wanted to leave the life. He wanted to give up the mission to be with her.
Mhm.
And when he realized, when she realized he was never going to leave the mission, I mean, when you really think about it, their relationship was never going to end well.
Mhm.
The second he put that cape and cowl on, there was no good way for it to end.
Yeah, I mean, it's just imagine what could have been, had he not gone down this road, or had he shot Joe Chill in the courtroom in the first movie. Like, everything changes. Had he just said this, I'm not going to do this, I want a real life, I'll fight crime from the boardroom, I'll organize charities, and I'll do this, that, and the other thing. But like, he just was hell bent on, dude, for lack of a better word, this revenge. The thing about Bruce Wayne and Batman, kids, is that you can dress it up as, it's my mission, I don't want anybody else to go through this again. All that stuff's pretty to talk about. A lot of this, Phil, is revenge driven. Like, not really against Chill, but like, I have the power to stop this from happening. That's revenge is playing in there somewhere, Phil, I have to believe.
Well, I mean, when you really dive into the psychosis here, is even if you don't want to say it's just outright revenge, this isn't a normal thing to do. Like, going out and dressing up as a bat and beating people up in alleys is not a normal reaction.
Yeah.
But that's what makes what Joker is saying as well so compelling, of him going, man, stop pretending to be like them. You're not like them.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I think that's part of him killing Rachel as well, of him going, listen, if I take her away from you and you stop trying to humanize yourself and stop acting like them, maybe you'll see what I'm actually saying, because you're not like them. And I don't care how you dress it up. You're not like them. You're like me.
That's a great line. The way he delivers that line is freaking great, dude. It's so good. Yeah. Again, going back to Ledger, because he's freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
We also have Eric Roberts here, who we have not mentioned. Eric Roberts, who has got one of the most hateable faces in the history of Hollywood, I submit. But he's also very charming. I don't know if he'll ever get enough credit. He's a very good actor, and he does more than a fine job here at playing Sal Maroni, who takes the place of Carmine Falcone, who, Phil, we assume is still in Arkham.
I would assume that he's somewhere in a padded room still yelling.
I would think so. So yeah, we've got him here. One of the stories about the movie, this is good, I never heard this. He said that even though Heath Ledger was known for being so immersed in his role, he was actually still a nervous young actor full of insecurity when the cameras were not rolling. He said that after they filmed the scene during the mob meeting, Heath went up to the other actors asking, "How was that? Was that okay?" And everyone looks at him and basically says, "Are you kidding me? That was amazing." So, like, even in those moments, Phil, Ledger was still a humble guy, just trying to do his bit to make this movie work.
Wow.
So, very cool.
But yeah, I thought he was great. I thought he was great in his role. I love that they add both of the mob characters from the comics, because we have the Russian in this as well. He's great.
That's right.
He's very sleazy, and he's very believable in his role. But yeah, you're right. I think Roberts, when he's sitting in that nightclub and the girl he's with is like, "Can we get out of here? We can't even hear each other talk." He's like, "What makes you think I would want to hear anything you have to say?" She's just like, "What? What'd you say?"
So good. Yeah. I love, again, the fact that we're not going to, the key here, Phil, to ground this thing in reality, don't pretend like the comics didn't happen.
Yes.
Very important.
But I think one of the important things from Long Halloween, and I've seen it handled the same way in other media with Batman, is the idea of escalation. And it's like once he showed up, um, the mob were obsolete, and someone like the Joker would rise to power. Somebody that would come with the theatrics would come behind him.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because again, like we kicked off the show saying one doesn't happen without the other.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is again part of the character arc with Batman in this movie of hey, he has done a lot of good for the city.
Hmm.
But if he doesn't show up, maybe the Joker never pops up. Maybe Bane doesn't pop up. Maybe all of these other things that happen to Gotham do not happen.
Yeah. Bane's a hard sell for me. Like, I think Tom Hardy did a bang up job in part three. We'll get there and we get there, but the voice at times became a little much, and I don't know. We'll get there and we get there, but part of me thinks they changed the character maybe a bit too extreme. But that's me talking.
Yeah.
But get there and we get there. We've also got Anthony Michael Hall here. He doesn't have a very big part, but he's here. He's always good. Nestor Carbonell as Mayor Anthony Garcia. And due to any given time, I thought this mayor was pretty crooked.
Yes.
He looked
Because
great.
of
Yeah.
course, it's Gotham. Of course,
Of
it'd be
course.
corrupt. But yeah, Anthony Michael Hall, of course, if people don't remember from Breakfast Club fame and Weird Science and everything else he's been in, correct?
Yes.
But yeah, he's great in the scenes that he's in. He, of course, has that exchange with Joker that is very good, where Joker is taunting him the whole time and trying to get him to lose his cool, and he eventually does.
Of course. Because the guy's pretty good at that.
Yeah, it's very funny. Anthony Michael Hall went from the nerd character in so many movies. Because again, Weird Science, he's also the nerd character in Breakfast Club. But at some point, he gets taller and he turns into the jock character in Edward Scissorhands. It's just like, well, wait a minute, when did this happen?
That's a good call. Yeah. Yeah. And the Russian that you mentioned, Richie Koster as Chechen, I think is what his name was. He's here. And let's see, Josh Harto as Reese, Coleman Reese.
Coleman Reese. What a great.
What a weird, odd character. I haven't researched this bit of the movie. I can't answer this question. I'm not sure why he's here. Do you have a good reason why he's even here?
I always had the theory that he was going to turn out to be the Riddler if they kept going.
Oh,
I always figured that him figuring out Batman was going to play into him eventually being the Riddler. He had red hair.
interesting. And the riddle of who Batman is, that's nice.
And I always thought he was going to end up being the Riddler, and he was always going to be able to dangle this thing over. Oh, I've known all along that you're Batman.
Man, I don't really hate that too much.
But of course, that did not happen. But his character arc in this movie is so funny to me. He has several scenes where it's just like, yeah, what were you thinking? When he comes in and he tries to blackmail Lucius, and Lucius just shuts him down immediately. Like, wait a minute, you think this guy dresses up as a bat and beats people half to death, and that's the guy that you want to blackmail?
Good luck.
And yeah, then he leaves, and then he tries it again with his next scheme of going to the press, and it almost gets him killed. And Bruce ends up saving his life, and he comes out there and looks at Bruce like, "Dang, man, maybe I should leave this guy alone."
Yeah, no kidding. That was really good. Yeah, I just couldn't figure. That's a good theory. I like the theory of this guy was supposed to be the Riddler. They named him Reese, by the way. So when it was Mr. Reese, it sounds like Mysteries.
Ah, see,
Very nice.
I could very much see him ending up being Riddler if they kept going. But yeah, that was another thing that I loved about this movie of Bruce outside of the mask doing things. Like when he gets on that chopper and he goes and does the investigating of that crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. Also how he saves the day in his Lamborghini. And he's Gordon's like, "You're a hero," and he's like, "What?"
Yeah.
He's like, "You saved this guy. You don't know what you did." He's like, "I was
trying
just
to change
catch
lanes." Yeah. So good. Like, look, at that point, there's no way Gordon suspects him of being Batman.
Yeah. Yeah, he might. He's just playing along.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, maybe.
in those moments, I go back and forth. I sometimes think that Christian Bale is the best Bruce Wayne, because I think he gets the dichotomy very perfectly. Because I think he goes from being very um, believable as this like aloof, drunken playboy, and right back to being very honorable and believable in some ways as well.
Yeah, and you know, again, we were talking about characters and how these actors work together and everything. I got to go back to Eric Roberts for a second. Something else he said about Heath. He had been told, you know, like stay away from Heath. When he's into the character, he's gone. Eric Roberts says it wasn't like that at all. He said he was perfectly fine. He was charming, likable, sweet, and very normal. He said all the
Yeah,
stuff I heard about him was not true. He was a lovely person.
yeah. There's a Dave Chappelle tells this joke where he went to go and meet Jim Carrey on the set of Man in the Moon, and he's completely immersed himself into being Andy Kaufman, all the way to the point where he goes in there to meet him, and everybody's like, "No, no, 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 he's Andy. Don't call him Jim."
Hmm,
So I know that some
right.
people do the method acting, and I had heard the same thing about Heath, that he had gotten fully immersed into the character.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, tall tales that come around or come up that fans write their own stories in their heads, Phil, as we said before.
Yeah, I don't think some of the coverage around Heath's death helped either.
That's fair.
I
Yeah.
think some of the coverage was a little irresponsible.
Yeah, I agree with that. We mentioned Commissioner Loeb. Rest in peace, Commissioner Loeb. Carlin McFarlane played Loeb again.
Yes.
Let's see. Chin Han is Lau. He doesn't got a lot to do, but he's here. Ron Dean is Wirtz. He's one of the crooked cops that Two Face finds in the bar, confronts him in the end. Monique Gabriella Kiernan, who was Ramirez, who
Yeah.
kind of felt like Phil, maybe she should have had a little bit bigger part. I kind of feel like she was underused a little bit.
It did. She filled her role. At some point, I kept wondering, like, are they gonna reveal that she's Renee Montoya or no?
Same, yeah.
But no, she was great. I love that Two Face very much. Well, like right straight away was like, yeah, this person and this person is corrupt, and what we know about Gordon, we would expect Gordon to do something, and he very
Mm.
rightfully by the end of the movie calls him out. Goes, "Hey, I told you that they were dirty, and you didn't do anything about it."
Oh, that's true. He did. He did warn him ahead of time. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Phil, I mean, you know, sometimes this movie's heavy-handed or whatnot, but we cannot, of course, as we've given its flowers during this review here today. But I mean, dude, this is almost a perfect movie. I mean, it knows what it is, and everything that it's doing, it does it well. Does it go
Mhm.
too hard and we need to get us some Oscars? Maybe, maybe it does, but you know, maybe
Uh,
that's me overthinking it. But dude, it feels like it's just about pitch perfect here.
yeah, great movie. A lot of great acting. A lot of like small characters in it that did great acting. Have to give Michael Jai White his props in the small part that he was in. He was
Got to
great.
mention him.
Uh,
Gamble.
yes, he was great. With his enough with the clown.
Yeah.
Uh, of course, rest in peace to Zeus. That
Oh,
almost stole this movie.
we can't stop without, we got to talk about that scene. What a great scene in this movie, dude.
Well, oh my God, he was so great, man. Man, it was just so tense, and I thought, oh man, this guy is gonna break this guy in half. Like, 'cause you're looking at him like this is a massive man, and he's just like lording over him. But it's so perfect with this idea that this and the first movie set up that um, Gotham is so dark and it corrupts all, and so you think that this guy, man, you're immediately judging a book by cover with this guy. You think, oh man, the other guys on the other boat, they're doomed.
Right.
He just like very matter of factly just throws the detonator out the window. Doesn't even make a second thought about it.
Yeah. I remember that in the theater, and I can't say I got choked up, but it was a powerful moment. Like, it was very powerful when that happened.
Very powerful because again, it's easy to judge a book by your cover on with Tiny's character and think, oh man, he's gonna kill everybody, and then it's just like, hey, he might be a criminal, but he wouldn't go that far.
Do you think cooler heads prevail if that happened in real life? What do you think?
I would like to hope so, but
Yeah.
I sometimes think that left to their own devices, people are more selfish than they are selfless.
Yeah.
But I would like to hope that people would think, like, nah, maybe we shouldn't just blow up a whole boat full of people to save our own necks. But we also live in a world where people are willing to elect somebody that, is awful and, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, everything's okay right now, but talk to us after November and let's see how we're all doing. Because,
Yeah, I think all the time about like the insurrection and people like legitimately storming the Capitol building and running in that building and thinking like, what could they have possibly been thinking out of this? And that just goes with some of the ideology of this movie of how, man, if somebody's upset about something and somebody's angry enough, they will believe in anything. Desperation's a funny thing, man. People will do a lot of things out of desperation. It's not a quote from this movie. I believe it is a quote from something else I was just watching 2 days ago. It might be My Hero Academia. One of the characters in the midst of this big riot happening, of all these people trying to rush into this hospital, and they're all angry, and they have a legitimate reason to be angry. And the hero character tells them, "Don't let them use your scars against you." And that is very much what Joker does for most of this movie. He tries to take all of this anger and distrust people have for each other and turn it against each other.
Yeah, for sure. We mentioned that Maggie Gyllenhaal here, of course, is in this flick. Katie Holmes is not. I don't know if I knew this till now that she's not in this movie because she chose to go do Mad Money instead.
That was a choice.
Yeah. Well, that movie made 26 million. Look, I'm not judging. It's fine, but maybe it's not fine. Like, I don't know. If you've seen one Diane Keaton movie, you've seen them all. I'm not trying to take a shot. It's my own opinion. It's fine. I don't care. It's whatever. But like, that's just me talking. How in the world by the way, how do you pass up? Never mind. We don't have to get into it. How do you pass this up?
Yikes.
Yeah. Well, a highly forgettable comedy movie about a bank heist of some sort that no one remembers, but that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on that movie. I'm trying to remember it, and I vaguely remember what it was about.
Queen Latifah's in it, Diane Keaton, Katie Holmes.
Oh, yeah. I remember now. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, whatever.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. World keeps spinning. We all woke up the next day, so it's all right.
Listen, man.
But
somewhere it's Tony Soprano on that boat with his son. Wheels in the sky, keep on turning.
Are you a Journey guy? Is that what I'm hearing? You like Journey?
It's a classic scene for Sopranos of him at the end on the boat. Journey's playing over.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, kids, I think that may just about wrap us up here. Before we go, Phil, we didn't really talk about the plot, the villain's master plan, of which we did not know what the master plan was. Let me just say this. The Joker is the most efficient villain that I've ever seen in a movie ever. Like, with the exception of Darth Vader, well, I can't even say Vader because the Stormtroopers are bumbling morons who can't hit a target 10 feet from them. But dude, the Joker's ability to make things happen, his ability to recruit henchmen after he kills them all one by one anyway, highly efficient villain, Phil. It's horrifying. It's tragic. It's sad. It's murderous. But man, he's pretty good at being this villain, doing that thing for a living. What do you think about the big villainous plot here in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, because his plot initially is to show the mob, hey guys, you need me because you guys are all afraid. Like, you need me to get rid of your real problem. And he pretty effectively proves that Batman is the real problem. And then his plan to go about getting rid of Batman is pretty smart. He immediately comes in and goes, well, we just got to get him to come out to the light of day and take his mask off. Oh, how do I do that? I'll just kill a bunch of people. What's he gonna do? He's not gonna listen to me. I'm just gonna keep killing people.
Yeah, I'll just keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so his plan is pretty smart. Uh,
Yeah.
and even after that, uh, his plan to really prove to Batman that people are as bad as he thinks they are, and that this city is beyond saving, is also pretty smart. Um, it just turns out that Gotham isn't as bad as he thought it was, and that
Mhm.
there is still good in people, and so he's proven wrong. But even with that, he still basically won because he took everything away from Batman. He took away the love of his life. He took away the guy that he bet everything on, that he thought he could uh, get behind and not be Batman anymore. Uh,
Mhm.
and he caused the entire city to question who he is.
Yeah. Man. Oof. I mean, it feels like he kind of
Yeah, he basically won. I mean,
yeah.
the only other villain in any comic book movie that I think effectively beat the heroes as well as he did was probably Zemo. Because
Ooh,
Zemo, if you don't know, he absolutely won by the end of that movie.
he totally won by the end of that movie. Most successful Marvel villain on screen of all time. You can't say Thanos because they got him back.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the strong case. Thanos doesn't win effectively the way he does in the first movie if Zemo doesn't efficiently split up the Avengers.
Well done. I can't really argue with that too awful much. Makes sense to me. Well, there's other things we haven't covered here, Phil. We haven't talked about the tech. Um, some of this stuff's based in real world. Some of it is very comic booky. But once again, man, Phil, where does he get those wonderful toys? Like,
uh,
fantastic, man.
Yeah, I love the scene in Hong Kong where he goes to get Lau out of that building and he's standing across the street shooting those detonators onto the wall with the
Yeah.
stickies on it. So cool. We get to see him glide across on using the cape, and man, I think that's one of the coolest scenes we've seen of Batman using the cape to glide. Uh Not just because it looks so cool in midair, but the way it converts back into the cape when he slides into the building. So cool.
So awesome. Being able to turn his head this time in a new cowl, that's very cool.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, yeah, the scene in Hong Kong, I believe that's the first time we see him in a new suit, correct?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, but yeah, I think all of that stuff with the stuff in Hong Kong is cool. Um, the Bat Pod is very, very cool. Um, cause he, it's weird because he, it's weird because he can turn his neck, but he can't really turn in this motorcycle for some reason. The way that he turns in the motorcycle is that it
Yeah,
kind of spins, and
yeah,
but he can't really turn that well because they're two huge, almost like 18-wheeler wheels, so he can't really turn well on it.
yeah. Like those tires are freaking huge on this
Yeah.
thing.
But yeah, I man, the scene of where the bat pod pops up and it's of him busting out of the tumbler and the tumbler self destructs, so cool. Um, him riding through that crowded expressway, it looks like, and he's like knocking everybody's mirrors off with it.
Mhm.
So cool.
So
Uh,
good.
he comes up out of subway, which is a metro station, guys. I'm sorry. Again, I live in Chicago. He's coming out of the metro station and he's like going through and coming back up onto the city limits. Man, so cool.
Ah, it's awesome. Yeah. The tumbler gets destroyed here. Like, it's gone. It's poof, over.
It's a very big comic book trope that the thing that you like from the first movie that's cool gets destroyed. I mean, in the second Batman movie, the Batmobile gets destroyed as well.
That's true. Yeah.
That technically was a Batpod.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Which I always thought that was cool when I was a kid, of him like smashing through that alley. I've always thought that was a cool scene.
So good. Yeah. And we talked about the cowl being, fitted to his head so he can turn his head. The suit is more streamlined, so he can move around. As a result of that, Christian Bale did not increase his muscle mass as he did for the first film, so they didn't have to worry about that. But this is I think the suit looks much better. There are moments when I'm thrown by how big the sides of his heads are and how it just narrowly ends at his neck. There's moments, Phil, where I kind of feel like that thing's too thick. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I see it. But
Yeah.
here's what I'll say to you about bat suits in general in this movie. I'm not wearing hockey pads, right?
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, I think that they like the suit very well throughout this movie.
Yeah.
I think there are several scenes where he's standing in the darkness and the way that the shadows are covering his face, it looks very good. I mean, even in the scene where he's fighting in that nightclub, I think they light it really well. Because he beats all these guys up and then he lands right in front of Sal, and then the camera's behind him while he's rising up to his feet, and it just looks so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Once again, it's a beautifully shot movie, like the first one is. There's
Yeah.
a lot of moving parts, which I feel like they juggle all the moving parts very well. I feel like all the actors got the appropriate amount of screen time. I didn't feel like one was left with too much and one not enough. I think everything was handled very well. Chris Nolan's very good at this, Phil. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
end on that. He's very good at this.
Very good director. There makes very smart choices with his movies, and I'm sure we'll get into that in the third movie. That's why I was so thrown by some of the choices he made in that one. I'm like, this doesn't seem like if Christopher Nolan is the filmmaker we believe him to be. Some of the decisions he makes in the third movie are kind of off, but I suspect some of that is studio meddling.
I would suspect you're probably right. And we will get there when we get there, kids. As you can see by the timeline order, Batman Begins was the episode previous to this one. If you folks have ever followed the show, I don't number the episodes. I do for the sake of, you know, promoting them or whatnot, but it's not really done in as much as they're in a necessary order. That way you can listen to whatever shows you want to in whatever order you want to. There's not necessarily a Marvel timeline happening here. So, but I can tell you that the next episode, we were talking about doing another film, but I feel like, you know, the final Batman movie in the Dark Knight trilogy needs to be the next one we do because I feel like we got a good flow right now. So keep your eyes open for that, kids. That will be the next episode after this one. Then we'll be back to some other stuff after that episode is released, and we'll be wrapping up the Nolan verse. Phil, before we get out of here in preparation for part 3 and everything we know is coming in that movie, let's try to wrap this up here and get your last word on The Dark Knight.
In many ways, kind of I don't want to say a perfect movie. Probably no such thing as a perfect movie, but this movie is pretty close to perfect as you can get. Um, just an excellent movie all around. Great cast, great direction, great cinematography, a great story, um, and I think it has just a great message. I think the thing that has always really resonated with me about Batman is just this idea that one man can make a difference and that we can rise above our darker urges. And this guy, in every way, had every chance to be a terrible person. um, he could have chosen to do anything with his life, and he chose to sacrifice in a lot of ways to make a difference. And by the end of the movie, you understand that. And I think you, even if you question his motives throughout the movie, I think that monologue at the end is just such a great note to end on. That shows you that Batman is this character because he's willing to do things that he knows somebody else can't.
Yeah, that's fair. And to Phil's point, kids, billionaires in real life are usually pretty awful.
Yes.
Not really great people, don't want to pay taxes, don't really help homeless people. They just want to go to space and ruin social media platforms. That's all they're here for. All and to try to ruin the country as well.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and go figure, even if you want to take the millionaire thing of it, this is a guy that lived most of his life without guidance from his parents and still turned out all right.
there you go. Oh, man. Great call. Yeah. Well, here's to more real life Bruce Wayne's, kids.
Wouldn't say that he's a well adjusted human being, but for the most part, he has a good moral code.
He's got a good moral compass. The way he goes about handling problems is suspect. But
Yeah, I mean, not well adjusted, emotionally unavailable in relationships,
sure,
but he has a good moral code.
you could hang out with him. You could have a beer with him if that's your thing.
He doesn't drink.
I forgot. Yeah, he doesn't drink. Well, me and him, we get along great. I don't break the law, and I don't drink. So
Yeah. How
do we know that I'm not Batman right now? I expected some support, and I got nothing. It's fine. What was the thing about you never seen Satan and Santa Claus in the same place? How's that joke go? You've heard that joke. Like, how do we not know they're the same guy? Look, in order to bring it back to Batman, here's what I'll say. We waited a long, long time to get a serious portrayal of Batman, and we finally got it with Michael Keaton's Batman in '89. Kids, that one's in the archives of the 6M. Please go check it out. And, the fact that we got 2 serious Batmen, and I'm, maybe 2.5, I'll count Kilmer. I'm not going to count the other guy.
3.
And then
you got to count Pattinson.
Well, I was just going to mention Pattinson. The jury's out on that. That's a slog of a movie. I'm sorry.
Something in the way.
Man, they're still paying for the rights to that song. That's crazy. But, yeah. There you have it, kids. There is The Dark Knight. Again, stay tuned. The next episode, we will finish up the Nolan verse and the Dark Knight trilogy. And we'll see what happens with that episode. But until then, that is The Dark Knight. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.